I never thought that packing a suitcase in my own home would feel like preparing for exile. When Calvin barked, "Like it or not, you're going to Pine Grove Assisted Living tomorrow," I calmly zipped my Samsonite suitcase in the foyer of my Decatur bungalow. He was already holding my house keys like a man collecting a hotel deposit, puffed up and loud. I'd seen that version of him before, at his wedding, taking credit for the down payment I helped with, smirking like the world owed him more. He thought I was frail, that I'd fold. But I had already checked the bathroom cabinet for missing pill bottles, scanned the dining room walls for crooked frames, and taken a photo of my signature from the forged power of attorney I found in his insurance file. He'd used one of my old check stubs as a reference for the handwriting. Sloppy. Greedy. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I asked him to put the bag in the car so I could grab a sweater. Instead, I locked myself in the guest bathroom, slid my phone out from behind the towel rack, my second phone, the one he didn't know about, and sent the pre-drafted text to Nadine, "Go time." He filed it. POA forged. Meeting still on? He knocked, called my name with a faux sweetness that made my teeth clench. I flushed the toilet and opened the door like nothing had happened. At exactly 4:37 p.m., I walked out of that house with my suitcase, my backup phone, and a flash drive in my bra containing every document Calvin had touched in the last 6 months. Pine Grove could wait. The sheriff's department couldn't. Change and leverage. I confirmed Calvin had forged a power of attorney and contacted legal support for next steps. 2 months earlier, on August 14th, Calvin first mentioned long-term care, and I started quietly moving $380,000 from our joint trust into a protected, revocable living trust under my sole name. It was after Sunday service. We were sitting in my den, and he kept glancing at the framed photo of me and his father on the mantel, like it was a problem he needed to solve. I'd just poured sweet tea. He hadn't even touched his glass before launching in something about responsible planning, inevitable decline, and being proactive for everyone's peace of mind. I let him finish every word. Not because I agreed, but because I needed to hear what tone he thought would manipulate me best. I told him I appreciated the concern. I told him I'd think about it. Then I walked straight to the bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, and took out the original trust papers I'd kept sealed since Vernon passed. There was a clause Vernon had insisted on, hidden in plain sight, allowing either trustee to move funds unilaterally for emergency reallocation. Calvin never read the footnotes, never read anything that didn't come with a bar graph or YouTube explanation. That evening, I logged into the joint trust account and initiated the first transfer, $25,000, into a newly established revocable trust under my name only, held by a separate custodian out of Asheville. Took less than 7 minutes. I titled it Nia Montgomery Living Protection Trust. It sounded vanilla, unremarkable. That was the point. Over the next 3 weeks, I repeated the process, no more than $35,000 at a time, always just under the reporting threshold that would flag an internal review. I even left a buffer in the original account to keep him complacent, a fat enough bone to gnaw on while I rerouted the marrow. Each transaction came with its own confirmation receipt, which I saved digitally and printed twice, one copy sealed in a labeled manila folder inside the safe, and one delivered to Nadine in person when we met for lunch near her office. She didn't say much, just looked at the amounts, nodded once, and said, "Smart move. Keep going." Calvin texted later that night, asking if I'd looked into the elder care options he'd sent. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No words, no cracks. Change and leverage. Successfully diverted $380,000 into a protected trust in my sole name without detection. Over dinner at Mary Mac's tea room, he belittled me for misplacing the salt, mocked my late husband's pension decisions, and asked if I'd updated my will, then sent me a brochure for transitional elder care housing in the mail. Calvin made the reservation under his name, like always. Corner booth, same place he liked to bring clients when he wanted to feel important. The waitress greeted him before she even brought the menus. He was already halfway through his iced tea before I'd taken my coat off. I sat across from him and watched him smooth his tie like he was gearing up for a deposition instead of catfish and collard greens. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention my arthritis flaring or how I'd missed choir practice that week. No, he reached for the salt shaker. I'd nudged slightly too far to the left and said, "You're slipping, Ma." Then he chuckled like it was a harmless joke, like the words didn't cut. I let it sit. I asked if he'd spoken to Mrs. Hanley from church about her recovery. He waved me off. said she. Wasn't really his concern. Then, halfway through his mac and cheese, he leaned back and brought up my will. Asked if it was in good order. Claimed he just wanted to avoid confusion later. Never once said the word death, but it was hanging in the air between us like burnt grease. When I got home, there was an envelope on my porch. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a glossy brochure for transitional eldercare housing. Not even folded properly, just stuffed in. Pine Grove's logo slapped across the front like it was a retirement dream instead of a pre-packaged burial plan. Room sizes, meal plans, activities. He'd circled memory support unit in blue pen. I didn't react, I didn't call. I slid the brochure into my file labeled Calvin Moves, right behind a copy of my updated revocable trust paperwork. Then I logged into my health insurance portal, changed all communication preferences to email only, and added two-step verification with a backup code only I knew. 2 days later, I sent a certified envelope to the law office that had handled Vernon's pension conversion, requesting a reissuance of beneficiary documentation. Calvin wasn't listed anywhere, but I wanted the originals in my hands. Change in leverage. Removed Calvin's physical access to insurance communications and initiated a records request confirming sole control over pension beneficiary rights. By early September, Calvin began bringing over blank papers for me to sign for the HOA, but when I held them up to the light, I saw pre-filled forms for medical consent and account access tucked beneath. The first time, he came by unannounced on a Tuesday morning with a cheap smile and a manila folder labeled Homeowners Association Forms. Said the HOA was updating their records and they needed a few things on file from residents over 70. Claimed he'd spoken to the board president. Told me it was just routine. He set the folder on my kitchen table, didn't even open it, just handed me a pen like the matter was settled. I didn't sign a thing. I told him I'd review it later, once I had time to read everything fully. He frowned for half a second, just long enough to confirm what I needed to know, then shrugged and made a show of checking the time. Said he had to run. Big meeting downtown. Left the folder behind. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I took the papers to the back porch where the light was stronger. I held each sheet to the sun coming through the storm door glass. They weren't blank. The top page on each stack was plain, just lines for signature and date, but tucked beneath were copies of power of attorney forms, medical release authorizations, and one that chilled me, an advance directive naming Calvin as health proxy. All pre-filled, all forged in his tight, angular printing. He thought I wouldn't notice the faint impressions where he'd traced over older forms. I scanned the entire stack into my backup laptop, labeled the file Attempted Consent Packets, and stored it on 2 flash drives, one for me, one for Nadine. Then I drove to my credit union and requested physical copies of my account signature cards, just to verify what they had on file. The teller, a young woman with short braids and smart eyes, brought out a sealed envelope and asked me to review it in the private cubicle. Every page matched the original forms I'd signed back in 2007. Clean. No amendments, no recent updates. When I got home, I burned the fake HOA packet in the metal trash barrel behind the shed. Watched every page curl into blackened curls before dousing them with the hose. Change in leverage? Intercepted and documented fraudulent medical and financial forms Calvin attempted to pass off as HOA paperwork. Verified my credit union signature card remained unaltered. I called my old friend Nadine, a probate paralegal at Thomas & Greer LLP, and she introduced me to her partner Aaron Delgado, who specialized in elder asset protection and immediately ran a property title check. I didn't wait for another envelope or surprise visit. The morning after I burned Calvin's forged paperwork, I called Nadine from the landline in my sewing room, the one he never thought to check or unplug. I kept my voice steady, but she heard the urgency anyway. We hadn't spoken at length in years, occasional Christmas cards, funeral hugs, but her tone shifted the moment I said, "Calvin's been getting creative with documents." She told me to come in that afternoon, said she'd clear an hour between appointments. I changed into slacks and a long-sleeve blouse, printed every document I'd scanned, and slid them into a legal binder with sticky tabs marking each incident: power of attorney, health proxy, mail tampering. By 2:15 p.m., I was sitting across from Nadine in a glass-walled conference room at Thomas & Greer. She didn't waste time on sympathy. Instead, she paged through my evidence and said, "You're not overreacting. Let me bring in someone who handles this exact mess." Erin Delgado walked in 5 minutes later, brown leather portfolio under her arm, no small talk. She'd worked elder fraud cases across the Southeast, nursing home land grabs, family embezzlement, medical identity theft. Her eyes didn't soften when I explained the details. They sharpened. She took down everything: dates, names, copies of communication, even the brand of pen Calvin used. Then she asked if I'd ever authorized a quitclaim deed on my home. The question threw me. I said no, never even discussed one. Erin tapped her tablet and started a title search through Fulton County's online records system. Less than 2 minutes later, she looked up. Expression flat. "There's a transfer recorded on August 9th, she said. "From you to something called the Montgomery Family Trust. You didn't sign this?" She turned the screen toward me. My name sat in crisp block print at the bottom of a scanned deed. The signature beside it wasn't mine. Not even close. I felt my hand curl into a fist, but I kept it on my lap. Erin requested the full recording details and promised to pull the digital submission file first thing in the morning. She asked if I could recall any other documents Calvin might have had access to: old tax returns, notary seals, insurance letters. I gave her a list and promised to follow up with photos. Change in leverage. Confirmed fraudulent property transfer of my home to an unauthorized trust. Secured legal representation specializing in elder asset protection. The first breadcrumb showed up when Erin sent over a PDF of a quitclaim deed Calvin had filed on August 9th, falsely transferring my home to the Montgomery Family Trust, without my signature or knowledge. She emailed it at 7:18 a.m. sharp. The subject line read, "Attached, recorded deed, urgent." I'd barely finished my coffee before I opened the file and saw the county seal, the document number, and my name misused in the grantor field like it belonged to someone else. The deed was crisp, official-looking, and falsely clean. My so-called signature floated at the bottom in a strange hybrid of cursive and print, neat enough to fool a glance, but all wrong in its rhythm. I signed legal forms with purpose, not the featherlight flourish of someone trying to mimic confidence. Erin followed the file with a call. She'd already spoken with the Fulton County Clerk's office and requested the digital fingerprint of the document submission, including IP address and timestamp. But she didn't wait for the results to act. She advised me to retrieve any mail I'd received referencing the Montgomery Family Trust, including utility statements, property tax assessments, or even junk mail. Anything that showed a paper trail of reassignment or redirection. I checked the mail bin I kept near the back door and pulled out a September water bill with the service name changed subtly. Montgomery Family Holdings, CO resident. Nothing forwarded, nothing delayed. But the name tweak was enough to catch under scrutiny. I took a photo and sent it immediately. That afternoon, I opened my home safe, pulled out Vernon's original mortgage documents, and compared the property ID numbers to the ones on the fake deed. They matched, line for line. Calvin hadn't just forged a transfer, he'd used exact parcel data pulled from our old files, probably from the time I let him scan tax documents for convenience 3 years ago. I hadn't questioned it then. He'd come over with a portable scanner and a flash drive, claiming he wanted to help keep my records tidy. I called Erin back before dinner. She asked me to drop off originals the next morning and not to email anything further without encryption. Her voice was calm, controlled. She was already treating this like a case in motion, not a maybe. Change in leverage. Received hard proof of fraudulent quitclaim deed filed by Calvin. Initiated chain of custody investigation with matching parcel data and supporting mail evidence. I logged into Fulton County's Clerk of Deeds portal using my old data entry tricks and confirmed that Calvin had digitally uploaded the deed using a stolen notary stamp from his wife's office, which he didn't know I recognized. I'd worked admin temp jobs in the 90s, bouncing between county offices when budgets were thin, and women like me were expected to smile while typing fast. What I kept from those years wasn't just a Rolodex of phone extensions. It was fluency in the back ends of municipal systems most folks barely knew existed. That morning, I used an old credentials pattern and security prompt logic to navigate into the deeper submission audit on the Clerk of Deeds site. Didn't need a password, just persistence and the right browser quirks. The upload trail confirmed it. The deed had been submitted remotely on August 9th at 3:42 p.m., using a third-party platform permitted for registered legal professionals. The attached notary ID code matched one I hadn't seen in years, but I knew it. Sharon D. Langley. That was his wife's maiden name before she hyphenated. I remembered the embossed stamp on their wedding thank you cards, the same one she used for her home business, notarizing loan docs for realtors. She had no business authorizing a property transfer she wasn't party to. Worse, the submission showed her seal and digital signature, both likely lifted from her business archive without consent, or maybe with a shrug and a favor. Either way, it was theft, fraud, a crime with a paper trail. I took screenshots of the submission logs, saved the full metadata report, and printed out 2 sets. One went into my binder. The other, I dropped off at Nadine's desk that afternoon, along with a handwritten note explaining how I recognized the notary details. She didn't say much, just nodded, took the envelope, and asked if I had any reason to believe Sharon was complicit. I told her I wasn't sure. Calvin had access to her files and devices, but she'd always been quiet, and quiet could mean guilty just as easily as cornered. Before I left the office, Erin stepped out from her meeting to tell me she'd located an archived sample of Sharon's verified notary signature from a mortgage filing 2 years ago. She'd run a side-by-side analysis with the one on my forged deed. If it didn't match, we'd be dealing with impersonation. Change in leverage. Confirmed Calvin used a stolen notary identity for digital deed upload, gathered metadata logs, and matched notary ID to his wife's professional seal. When I asked Calvin directly why he needed access to my insurance statements, he smirked and said, "You're better off with someone else handling this stuff now. Less stress for you, more freedom for me," then offered to just take care of it all. I picked my moment carefully. It was a Sunday afternoon, after service but before dinner, when his guard usually slipped and his ego ran highest. He was sitting on my couch, scrolling his phone, pretending to check stock alerts. I brought out 2 envelopes I'd intercepted from the mail bin, both opened at the corner, both addressed to me but rerouted through a post office box in Buckhead. I laid them on the coffee table without a word. He glanced at them, didn't even flinch. "That's just temporary," he said, brushing a crumb off his jeans. "Mail mix-up. I've been helping manage your accounts, remember?" Then he leaned back like it was a favor I should be thanking him for. "A lot of this stuff's overwhelming, Ma. You're better off letting me handle it. Less stress for you, more freedom for me." I asked why he needed access to my health insurance portal. He gave a soft, fake laugh and said, "Because you said you were having trouble with those login codes, remember? I figured I'd just streamline it." His voice stayed light, like we were discussing groceries, but his eyes scanned the room as he spoke, tracking where my phone, purse, and keys were. That was his tell. He got restless when he sensed control slipping. I didn't argue. I asked if he wanted lemonade, then stepped into the kitchen long enough to text Erin. Verbal confirmation. He admitted mail reroute and account handling. I have witnesses if needed. Back in the living room, he was holding the envelopes again, angling one toward the light like he'd forgotten what was inside. I reminded him I'd already spoken to the insurance company and updated my access settings. 2-factor authentication. Physical mail disabled. I made sure he heard every detail. He blinked once, too slowly, and then smiled the way people do when they're rewriting a story mid-sentence. Before he left, he said, "Just trying to help." I locked the door behind him, then checked every browser tab on my laptop to make sure I'd signed out of anything connected to personal finance or benefits. Change in leverage. Obtained verbal admission from Calvin about unauthorized mail rerouting and insurance portal access. Secured digital accounts with updated protocols. Erin unearthed 2 more documents, a forged durable power of attorney submitted to Truist Bank, and an unauthorized address change filed with my 401k administrator, both showing Calvin's condo in Buckhead as the contact address. She called while I was sorting through my tax folders, her voice clipped but focused. 2 new ones, she said, then paused to let it land. He submitted a durable POA to Truist on September 2nd. Digital upload, notarized, but the stamp doesn't check out. And your 401k? The correspondence address was changed to a Buckhead condo. Not your home, his. I didn't ask how she found them. I already knew Erin was thorough. the kind of woman who read metadata like scripture. She'd pulled my financial institution logins through a secure audit request, flagged inconsistencies, then matched timestamps across platforms. The signature on the Truist document resembled mine in shape, but had a hesitation in the G, a telltale twitch I'd seen before on that forged deed. I told her that wasn't my signature. She didn't need convincing. I'm submitting a formal challenge to the bank by noon. You'll co-sign the affidavit of forgery and we'll have it notarized in-house, she said. But the 401k move is more serious. It looks like he also listed himself as a communication proxy, which gives him visibility without formal control. Slippery, but intentional. I pulled out my last quarterly statement and flipped through the pages. The account summary looked intact, but I noticed the small text at the bottom. For questions, contact plan administrator at the address above. That address wasn't mine. It hadn't been for at least 6 weeks. I'd received no emails about the change. No confirmation letter. Just silence, while Calvin rerouted access through his own mailbox. That night, I composed a signed letter to the plan administrator, demanding an immediate audit of all changes made since July. I included a copy of my driver's license, the original account application from 2009, and a line stating clearly, I have never resided at nor authorized correspondence to 1685 Belmont Way, Unit 304, Buckhead, GA. I mailed it certified with return receipt. I also dropped off my affidavit to Erin first thing the next morning. She had already logged it in her case binder and confirmed Truist had frozen any POA activity pending review. Change in leverage. Challenged forged POA at Truist Bank. Launched formal address fraud dispute with 401k administrator and restricted further proxy access. The true scale hit me when Erin subpoenaed my bank's transaction logs and uncovered a $75,000 attempted wire transfer from my investment account to a Shell LLC Calvin's side hustle, blocked only because I had set daily limits. The report came in a thick manila envelope, hand-delivered by a legal courier who barely made eye contact as he passed it off. Erin didn't send summaries over email. She understood risk. I opened the packet at my kitchen table and began sorting through pages of black and white transaction details, most of them routine, dividends, rebalancing, minor service fees, until one entry, dated September 21st, stopped me cold. The amount, $75,000. The recipient, Vantage Mark Holdings LLC, status, blocked, exceeds transfer limit. Erin's note was clipped to the printout with a red paperclip. Matched EIN to Calvin Montgomery. No record of this entity operating under any registered investment activity. Filed in June. Buckhead address. I remembered the name faintly. Calvin had once bragged about diversifying into commercial holdings, whatever that meant, during a church fundraiser. I hadn't paid him any mind at the time. I figured it was just another half-formed business fantasy, like his failed app idea or the vintage car flipping scheme that never left his garage. Now it had a paper trail, one he thought I'd never see. The transfer had been initiated at 2:36 a.m., timed to avoid attention, likely hoping to squeeze under automatic alerts. But the security threshold I'd set up 3 years ago, the one he mocked me for calling paranoid, flagged the amount. My investment custodian required verbal authorization for anything over $25,000. Calvin never got that far. I took the report to Erin the next day. She was already drafting a formal complaint to FINRA and preparing a request for internal investigation at the investment firm. He's testing limits, she said without looking up. If that wire had cleared, it would have disappeared into a series of layered accounts. He's not just greedy, he's methodical. I signed an affidavit stating I had not authorized, nor was aware of, any transfer to Vantage Mark Holdings. Erin had it notarized on the spot. She also submitted a fraud alert to all 3 credit bureaus on my behalf, locking my credit profile against further financial moves. Change in leverage. Exposed a blocked $75,000 transfer to Calvin's Shell LLC, triggered fraud investigations across financial institutions, and enacted a full credit freeze. 3 days later, I received a letter from Pine Grove Assisted Living with my name pre-registered for residency and a $5,000 deposit already paid, non-refundable, per the contract Calvin signed as guardian. The envelope was thick and perfumed, sealed with a gold sticker like it contained an invitation instead of a warning. At first, I thought it might be a catalog or a church fundraiser, but the Pine Grove logo slapped across the return address gave it away before I even slid it open. Inside was a welcome packet addressed to Ms. Nia Montgomery, resident. It detailed room assignments, meal schedules, and a full calendar of activities I hadn't agreed to. Yoga, watercolor class, group therapy. It even included an orientation checklist with my name typed neatly under the phrase, "Assigned Guardian, Calvin Montgomery." Tucked between the pages was a copy of a signed contract. 5 pages, initialed on every line and signed at the bottom. Not by me. Calvin had scribbled my name in a half-hearted imitation, then signed his own as legal representative. The deposit had already cleared $5,000 from a cashier's check drawn from an account I didn't recognize. It wasn't one of mine, and it wasn't connected to his known personal banking. Aaron would trace that trail later. The language in the contract was precise and ruthless. Non-refundable deposit. 72-hour cancellation clause. Once the orientation period began, additional fees applied for withdrawal or early termination. They were preparing a room for me on the 2nd floor. I'd never even toured the place. I called Pine Grove's intake office, pretending to be my own assistant. Said Ms. Montgomery was inquiring about who authorized the move. The woman on the line sounded flustered when I asked for documentation. I made her spell out the name on the guardianship paperwork. Calvin, of course. She mentioned the documents were emailed and digitally notarized on September 28th. I asked for copies and a breakdown of the refund policy. She said someone would call me back. They didn't. Instead, I hand-delivered the entire packet to Erin the next morning. She scanned everything, highlighting inconsistencies in the signature spacing and digital metadata. She also filed an immediate cease and desist notice with Pine Grove's legal department, warning them of impending legal action if any further contact occurred. Change in leverage. Discovered fraudulent guardianship used to reserve assisted living space. Initiated cease and desist through legal counsel and documented forged contract. That night, I sat alone on my porch with my late husband's Veterans Affairs flag folded in my lap and realized that if I didn't take action now, Calvin would erase every sacrifice that flag represented. The porch was quiet except for the soft creak of the swing beneath me. I hadn't turned on the light. The folder with Pine Grove's paperwork sat unopened beside me, but I didn't need to read it again. I knew every line now. The forged consent, the false guardianship, the room number assigned to a future I hadn't chosen. The flag was still crisp, triangle folded, its stars aligned with military precision. Vernon had been proud to serve. 31 years in uniform, 2 tours, 1 Purple Heart. When we laid him to rest, I promised I'd protect what we'd built. Not just the house, not just the accounts, but the principle. The idea that you earned your place, and no one, especially not family, had the right to steal it because you aged. Calvin wasn't just chipping away at my assets. He was gutting my autonomy in pieces, disguising theft as care. He thought, because I kept my voice even, because I didn't threaten or scream, that I didn't notice the walls tightening around me. But I had noticed, and I had enough. I opened my laptop and began drafting a declaration of intent, a sworn statement that I was of sound mind, managing my own affairs, and contesting all attempts to place me under guardianship. I included the date, attached a scan of my driver's license, and listed Aaron Delgado as my legal counsel. When I finished, I printed 3 copies and locked them in separate locations, one in the safe, one in a sealed envelope taped under the kitchen sink, and one in the binder Nadine had started calling the Calvin file. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with First Community Credit Union, told them I wanted a joint estate review with my son present. To go over tax liabilities, I said. The branch manager offered a private conference room. I confirmed the date and time, October 6th, 3 p.m. Then I called Calvin and told him the same. "Bring your lawyer," I said. He laughed, asked why. I told him I'd explain when we got there. Change in leverage. Executed formal self-declaration of mental and financial competency. Scheduled legal review meeting under pretense to confront forged authority in person. On October 6th, I requested an estate review meeting at First Community Credit Union and told Calvin to meet me there with his lawyer, under the pretense of reviewing tax liabilities. I arrived 15 minutes early, binder in hand, dressed in the same navy pantsuit I'd worn to Vernon's retirement ceremony. It still fit. Terrence Boyd, the branch manager, met me in the lobby with a cautious smile. He knew something wasn't routine. Aaron and Nadine were already inside the private conference room, their folders laid open, tabs and markers like ammunition ready for deployment. No one made small talk. This wasn't for performance, it was for record. At exactly 3:01, Calvin walked in alone. Pressed shirt, too much cologne, leather briefcase tucked under his arm like he had something real inside it. When he saw Aaron, he paused. When he saw Nadine, he faltered. He recovered fast, pulled his mouth into that fake smile, and said, "Didn't know we were bringing reinforcements." I didn't answer. I motioned to the chair across from me and opened my binder. Terrence began the meeting by confirming our objective, estate planning alignment, and asked Calvin to verify his relationship to the account holder. "Son," he said. "Financial caretaker," informally. Aaron slid the first document across the table, a printout of the forged durable power of attorney submitted to Truist. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The header read, "Authorization signed August 15th, 2025. My name, my birth date, my fake signature." Calvin glanced at it, then looked up and shrugged. "There must have been a mix-up," he said. "She told me to help with her accounts. Maybe someone used the wrong template." I leaned forward, voice steady. "You filed that document without my consent and signed it in my name." Aaron didn't let him regroup. She laid out the transaction log from the attempted $75,000 transfer and followed it with a notarized affidavit from my 401k administrator confirming the address change to Calvin's condo. Each document formed a chain, tight, unbroken, undeniable. Then she reached into her folder and produced the side-by-side notary signature comparison, featuring his wife's notary stamp and the one used on the quitclaim deed. It was the same seal. The digital fingerprint showed it had been uploaded from a laptop registered to Sharon's small business license. Terrence didn't ask for more. His voice was flat when he spoke. "All account access tied to Mr. Montgomery is suspended. Effective immediately. Change in leverage. Exposed fraudulent estate documents and notary impersonation during formal bank meeting. Revoked Calvin's access to financial institutions on record." At 3 p.m., in the bank's private conference room, with Nadine, Aaron, and branch manager Terrence Boyd present, I handed out printed packets of email screenshots, notarized statements, forged PDFs, and transaction history. Calvin didn't reach for the documents right away. He just stared at the cover sheet. Bold letters, stapled clean. Exhibits of fraudulent activity, Montgomery Family Trust. I'd arranged each packet identically. Date-stamped screenshots of altered insurance notices, forged legal forms with his false signature layered over mine, bank notices redirecting correspondence to his Buckhead condo. Every page backed by a receipt, a PDF trail, or a notarized rebuttal. No assumptions, just proof. Aaron directed the flow. She narrated the packet like a courtroom opening. This was the forged deed. That was the digital notary seal. Here was the fabricated power of attorney. Nadine passed around the document confirming the false guardianship used to enroll me at Pine Grove, highlighting the timestamp and IP origin. Calvin's laptop, Sharon's notary ID, my forged consent. He reached for the water glass but didn't drink. He adjusted his cufflinks instead, stalling. "I didn't think it was criminal," he muttered, half to himself. "I just thought we were getting ahead of things." The same man who once borrowed my AAA card to avoid paying for a tow truck was now claiming he forged federal documents as a favor. I turned to Terrence, who hadn't said much beyond noting the recorders in the room. "Everything in that binder was assembled in less than 6 weeks," I said, voice even. "He's been acting under false authority across financial, legal, and healthcare institutions. What happens now is your call." Calvin leaned forward, trying to inject warmth into his tone. "Ma, we can work this out. You know me. I've always had your best interest." I didn't flinch. "My name is Nia Montgomery. I don't need a guardian. I need a record." That's when Aaron placed one final sheet in the center of the table, a sworn affidavit from the notary whose seal had been used without consent. She'd confirmed, in writing, that she was on vacation during the week the deed had been filed. She had never notarized anything for Calvin. She'd never met him. No one said a word after that. Change in leverage presented complete documented case of forgery, digital fraud, and identity misuse. Received affidavit confirming notary impersonation by Calvin. I started with the forged deed, followed with the doctored power of attorney, then dropped the attempted $75,000 transfer, and when Calvin stammered that it was a misunderstanding, Aaron revealed a signed affidavit from the notary he impersonated. He hadn't expected the meeting to turn legal. He thought it would be another quiet negotiation, another performance where I'd sit politely while he explained why theft looked like help. But I gave Aaron the floor, and she didn't soften anything. She moved methodically, each exhibit numbered, each page dated and source verified. When she slid the forged deed across the table, she noted that it had been filed the same day Calvin claimed to be handling a work emergency. That lie unraveled first. Then came the doctored POA. Same pen pressure, same manipulated notary stamp. Aaron pointed out the metadata indicating it was submitted from Calvin's IP address at 2:03 a.m. Not exactly standard timing for elder care paperwork. Terrence leaned forward as she laid down the internal fraud alert from Truist, which had flagged inconsistencies the moment her inquiry triggered their compliance team. I kept my eyes on Calvin. He was blinking faster now, lips pressed tight. I reached for the next section myself. I wanted him to hear it from me. This is the $75,000 wire attempt. You named Vantage Mark Holdings as the recipient. That's your shell company. You filed the LLC in June, listed yourself as the sole member, then tried to drain funds from my account on September 21st. Only reason it failed? Daily limit cap. He opened his mouth, couldn't find a sentence. That wasn't. It was an investment. It would have come back, he said finally, voice thin. Aaron waited until his words evaporated, then laid the affidavit on the table. Signed, dated, sealed. Sharon's former colleague had notarized the statement. She was out of town the week Calvin submitted the deed, and her stamp had been reported stolen earlier that month. Her notary license had since been suspended, pending investigation. I never thought you'd go this far, I said. Not to wound, but to make it plain. Not with your father's name still on the loan. Not with your wife's notary seal burned into the paper. Calvin sat back in his chair, spine slackening. Whatever confidence he walked in with had drained beneath the weight of actual evidence. Change in leverage. Confirmed timeline of fraud. Presented key affidavit disproving notary validity. And forced verbal admission of intent under legal pressure. The silence after the affidavit settled was heavier than the paperwork. Terrence didn't hesitate. He reached for his desktop phone, pressed the line for internal security, and said, "Please suspend all linked access under client ID 329M, effective immediately. Freeze associated profiles. No further transactions permitted without primary account holder verification." He didn't ask my permission. He already had it. Filed under the legal authority I'd reaffirmed in person 2 weeks earlier, verified with photo ID and my original account contract. Calvin started to object, but his voice caught mid-sentence. Wait, can we talk about this privately? His tone had changed. Not angry, not smug, desperate. It cracked around the edges like someone realizing the elevator wasn't stopping where he thought. Aaron ignored the plea. She was already opening a new folder, pre-filled revocation forms. She slid one across the table. Ms. Montgomery, this will officially terminate any power of attorney, durable or otherwise, granted under your name. Once notarized, it goes to the probate court, financial institutions, and Pine Grove's administration. Her pen was ready. I signed it without a pause. Nadine stood and walked the document over to Terrence's assistant, who appeared at the door with a mobile notary journal and seal. 10 minutes later, the revocation was stamped, sealed, and logged into the credit union system. Aaron emailed scanned copies directly to the probate office, flagging it as emergency action based on credible forgery evidence. A copy went to Pine Grove's intake director, another to the state board overseeing elder financial abuse cases. Calvin sat there with nothing in his hands. Not a folder, not a phone, not a legal advocate beside him. He looked like he wanted to speak, to salvage what was left of the story he'd built, but every piece had been dismantled. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, and said, "I just thought, if I managed things early." I stood up. "You didn't manage. You manipulated. That's over now." Erin gathered her folders. Nadine collected mine. Terrence offered me a respectful nod, then escorted Calvin out separately. No access, no codes, no privileges remaining. Change in leverage. Immediate account access revoked. Notarized emergency POA termination filed and distributed to legal and institutional parties. I didn't have to tell anyone what happened. The documents moved faster than gossip ever could. Erin filed notice with the Fulton County Probate Court by noon Friday, and Nadine dropped off courtesy packets at the HOA office in Pine Grove before sunset. By Saturday morning, I had 3 voicemails from neighbors who just wanted to check in, each one layered with hesitation and quiet outrage. The church bulletin never names names, but Sunday's service included a prayer for those facing legal and moral reckoning. I saw 2 elders exchange a look when Calvin's mother-in-law shifted uncomfortably in her pew. He wasn't there. Neither was Sharon. Their usual seats in the 3rd row stayed empty. That afternoon, the Buckhead Heritage Association called an emergency board meeting. Calvin had been treasurer for 4 years, always loud about preservation projects, always first to volunteer others. Time. Turns out, they'd never run a background check. When the news reached the board, along with notarized proof of forged documents and an active investigation, his removal was unanimous. No debate, no appeal. His name was stripped from their website by Monday. An archived PDF of meeting minutes showed a blank where Treasurer's Update used to be. His personal project, the Montgomery Historical Pathway Initiative, was tabled indefinitely. No one wanted the PR mess that came with it. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Consequence has a weight of its own, and it carried itself. At home, I went through my files again, not out of fear, but to ensure closure. The revocation of POA had been received by all major parties. Erin confirmed the investigation had opened with the Secretary of State's Notary Division. My financial institutions marked my accounts as Guardian Restricted, Client Only. Calvin's email was blocked on every channel. The trust I'd moved the funds into months earlier now showed full asset protection, updated beneficiaries, and a notarized direction to exclude him from disbursement permanently. I placed one final printout in my binder, the official HOA memo stating Calvin Montgomery was no longer affiliated with any position of fiduciary responsibility within the community. Change in leverage. Public exposure of fraud resulted in Calvin's removal from civic roles, official restrictions placed on account access, asset rights, and legal standing. 2 weeks later, I changed the locks on my Decatur home, updated my legal documents, and replaced my front doormat with a new one that read, "Welcome, if you come correct," beside a gleaming new set of master keys. The locksmith arrived just after noon. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, and respectful enough not to ask questions when he saw the thick folder labeled Revoked Access on my coffee table. I pointed out all 4 doors, the front, back, basement entry, and garage. "Change them all," I said. "No duplicates but mine. No spares left under flower pots or mailbox lids." He nodded once and got to work. While he drilled, I sat at the dining table and reviewed the fresh set of legal documents Erin had prepared. Updated will, revised trust instructions, permanent removal of Calvin from any authority or designation related to my estate. It was all signed, witnessed, notarized, and certified. She hadn't just protected my present, she sealed my future. I emailed scanned copies to Nadine for secure filing, then printed one set for the safe and another for the lockbox in my bedroom closet. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt something settle, like the floor had been tilted for months and was finally level again. Outside, the locksmith handed me the new master set in a black velvet pouch, professional and clean. I took it and stepped out to the porch. The sun was sharp on the brick, and for a moment, the house looked unfamiliar, like I was seeing it not as a memory of what it had been, but as something still mine to shape. I bent down and tossed the old mat into the garbage bin, replaced it with the new one I'd bought online days earlier. Heavy rubber, no frills. The words were etched deep into it, "Welcome if you come correct." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd made space for people out of habit, not merit. Calvin had counted on that. But doors are just openings until someone earns the right to stand on the other side. Before going back in, I double-checked the locks. The click of that final bolt sliding into place didn't just signal security. It marked the end of the last loophole he'd used to get in. Change in leverage, finalized legal restructuring of estate, secured physical property with new locks, exclusive key control, and updated trust protection.